The night was burning behind her. Flames tore through the old ranch house as Clara Monroe stumbled into the desert, her clothes shredded by the fire and the wind. Every step left a mark of blood in the sand. She could still hear his voice behind her. The man she once called her husband. His shouts rose through the crackle of the blaze, promising she would pay for running. By the time the sun rose, her lips were dry and her hands trembling. The desert was endless. The sky was cruel and the air sharp as knives. Clara dragged herself forward until her knees gave out beside a weathered barn. She sank against the wooden wall, the splinters biting into her back. Her breath came in short, broken gasps. Shame and exhaustion fought inside her. She pulled an old burlap sack over her head to hide her face, to hide what her life had become. Jeremiah Clay found her that way. A shape collapsed in the dust, a stranger half alive. He had seen death before, plenty of it, and this looked close to it. At 55, Jeremiah had buried more people than he could remember. Once a doctor, now a ghost of one. He had promised himself he would never pick up his tools again. But her face, pale and defiant, reminded him of Eliza, the wife he couldn't tell. That old ache pulled him forward. But when he saw her hands twitch, that promise broke without a thought. He carried her inside the barn, laid her down on a pile of straw, and poured water over her cracked lips. When her eyes opened, they were wild and full of fear. He spoke softly, almost afraid his voice would scare her further. "You're safe now." The words tasted strange, like a lie told too many years after it mattered. For 2 days, she barely moved. Jeremiah worked in silence, mending her wounds with steady, practiced hands. Every cut on her skin was a story she refused to tell. Every time he looked at her, he saw pieces of someone else, the woman he once loved, the one he couldn't save. Clara helped with chores when she was strong enough to stand. Her movements were careful, her eyes always tracing the horizon. Each sound of wind or hoof made her flinch. Jeremiah didn't ask questions. He knew that some people carried pain like a shadow. If you stared too long at it, it swallowed you whole. Then one evening, the stillness broke. A lone rider appeared in the distance, cutting through the heat haze. Jeremiah's instincts woke before his reason. His hand found the revolver on his hip. The rider stopped at the fence, his horse black as coal, his coat thick with dust. "Name's Elias Crow," he said. "Dr. Miller sent me. He said you might need help." The name Miller struck Jeremiah like a spark in dry grass. It had been years since anyone had dared to call him doctor. Elias looked from Jeremiah to Clara, reading the tension in the air. "Foster's men are riding this way," he said flatly. "You don't have much time." Clara froze. Her pulse quickened. Jeremiah studied the bounty hunter's eyes, hard eyes, but not cruel. He didn't trust him, but he trusted the fear in Clara's face even less. Without another word, Jeremiah saddled his horse. Whatever peace he had found here was over. The ghosts he buried had found him again. As they rode away under the dying sun, Clara looked back once. The wind howled through the empty barn where she had fallen. Her old life had burned to ashes, but the road ahead might be worse. Would the man who saved her become her salvation, or just another kind of danger? The desert in summer was no friend to anyone. Heat shimmered off the rocks, twisting the horizon like a mirage. Jeremiah Clay rode with his hat pulled low, sweat tracing lines through the dust on his face. Behind him, Clara followed on a small brown mare. Elias Crow led the way, silent as a shadow. They had been riding since dawn. The sun was merciless, the air dry enough to steal a man's breath. Jeremiah glanced back at Clara every few minutes. She was new to the saddle, but stubborn enough to hide her pain. Her hands were blistered, her lips cracked, yet she refused to complain. That quiet strength unsettled him more than tears ever could. When they stopped by a dry creek bed, Clara slid off her horse and sat in the shade of a rock, her legs shaking. Elias poured her a small cup of water. "Sip slow," he said. "Desert takes more from you than you realize." She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm fine." Jeremiah smiled, faintly amused. "You lie as bad as I do." That earned the smallest laugh from her. The sound caught him off guard. It had been years since laughter had found a place in his life. They rested only a short while. Elias showed them how to suck moisture from barrel cacti, while Clara pointed out signs of a distant spring, a trick from her childhood wanderings. Elias was always watching the sky, scanning for movement on the ridges. "They'll come," he said. Men like Foster never quit. Jeremiah didn't doubt it for a second. He had seen the kind of pride that drove men to ruin. Foster would hunt her not for love, but for control. It was the kind of madness Jeremiah knew too well. By late afternoon, the land began to change. The flat desert rolled into low hills, dotted with twisted juniper trees. The air smelled faintly of rain, but no cloud showed mercy above. Clara's horse stumbled, and Jeremiah moved beside her, steadying the reins. "You're doing fine," he said quietly. "Better than most would." Clara managed a tired smile. "I had a good teacher." Elias glanced over his shoulder, a rare grin breaking across his face. "Don't encourage him. He'll start giving lectures again." Even Jeremiah laughed at that. For a brief moment, the world didn't feel so cruel. By sunset, they reached the foothills, where Elias said the Apache caves lay hidden. The light turned golden, painting the rocks red and orange. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. But as they climbed higher, the wind shifted. Jeremiah's horse stopped, ears twitching. Elias raised a hand, signaling silence. The desert had gone too quiet. No birds, no wind. Just stillness. He looked back at Jeremiah, his eyes sharp. "Someone's following." Clara's hand went to her mouth. Jeremiah reached for his revolver. The old reflexes rising like ghosts from another life. The peace of the desert was over, and what was waiting in those hills would change everything they thought they knew about trust, survival, and the price of saving a life. The wind picked up fast that night. A storm was coming. You could taste it in the air, sharp like iron. Jeremiah Clay tightened the saddle straps while Elias Crow checked the ridge with his rifle. Clara stood near the horses, her hair whipping in the wind, eyes wide with worry. They were close to the caves now, but something in the silence made Jeremiah uneasy. The kind of quiet that comes before all hell breaks loose. Elias motioned for them to move. They rode hard through narrow trails, the sky turning from gold to bruised purple. When the first drop of rain hit Jeremiah's hand, it was warm like blood. The storm was chasing them, and behind it, maybe worse things than rain. By the time they reached the mouth of the cave, lightning split the sky open. Elias led the way inside, his lantern flickering against the rock walls. The air was cooler there, heavy with the smell of wet stone. A small spring trickled in the back, echoing softly, almost peaceful if you ignored the thunder outside. Claire sank onto the ground, too tired to speak. Jeremiah handed her water, watching her hands tremble as she drank. For the first time, he realized how young she really was, barely 25 and already carrying a lifetime of scars. Elias built a small fire, the flame dancing low. "You can rest," he said. "I'll keep watch." But Jeremiah didn't sleep. He sat near the cave mouth, revolver resting across his knees, listening to the storm growl. Then, through the roar of the wind, came another sound. Hooves, faint at first, then closer. Elias's head snapped up. They found us. In seconds, the quiet cave became a battlefield. Gunfire cracked like thunder. Echoing off the stone, Jeremiah fired back, each shot a memory from the war he'd tried to forget. The smell of gunpowder mixed with rain, sweat, and fear. Clara crawled deeper into the cave, clutching the small cross around her neck. She whispered a prayer no one could hear. A scream tore through the storm. One of the riders fell. Then another. Elias shouted something, but the wind swallowed it whole. 2 riders lay still in the mud, washed away by the flash flood that roared down the canyon. The third fled into the night. And the rain kept pouring as if the sky itself was crying. They had survived. But as Jeremiah looked at Elias's arm, bleeding through his sleeve, he knew the storm wasn't done with them yet. The firelight flickered over their faces. 3 souls bound by chance, by pain, by the kind of fate that doesn't ask permission. And out there, beyond the rain, someone was still coming, so maybe. Before we ride into what happens next, take a breath with me, you. Grab a warm cup of tea, lean back, and let the storm settle a little. If you enjoy wandering these dusty trails with us, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next chapter. Now tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? By the time the rain stopped, the desert had turned to mud. Their horses were exhausted, their clothes soaked through. But the lights of Silver Creek shimmered ahead like a promise they almost didn't believe. The town was small, tucked into a valley surrounded by pine hills. Wooden storefronts, a church steeple, a dusty saloon, and a boarding house with one broken lantern swinging in the wind. It didn't look like much, but to them, it was safety for one more night. Mrs. Parker, the owner of the boarding house, was the kind of woman who could read a man's secrets just by the way he held his hat. She eyed Jeremiah, Elias, and Clara from head to toe before saying, 2 rooms, no questions asked. If you pay in advance, that sounded good enough. Jeremiah handed her a few coins, and within minutes, they had shelter, food, and for the first time in days, silence. Clara washed the dust from her hair. Jeremiah caught himself staring too long at her reflection in the cracked mirror. She looked younger somehow, freer, like the storm had taken something heavy away from her. Elias came in later, his arm still bandaged. Stage to California leaves in 3 days, he said. If we can stay invisible that long, she's gone for good. 3 days, Jeremiah repeated quietly. That's not much time. Elias smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Long enough if we play smart. The next morning, they sat together over coffee that tasted more like dirt than beans, and Elias laid out his plan. Foster's men are out there asking questions, and he said, so we give them the wrong answers. We stay right here in town, out in the open. Jeremiah frowned. How the hell do you stay hidden in plain sight? Elias grinned. You don't hide, you change. By noon, Mrs. Parker was helping Clara dress in a black widow's gown borrowed from a trunk upstairs. Jeremiah wore a proper vest, Elias a neat jacket, and when they walked down the main street, no one saw 3 fugitives. They saw a grieving widow traveling west with her father and his business partner, but in the saloon. One of Foster's men glanced twice at Elias's bandaged arm. Jeremiah whispered, "Act natural," as they slipped out the back. Jeremiah played the part well, too well, maybe. Every time Clara slipped her hand into the crook of his arm, something in his chest stirred that hadn't moved in years, but under all the calm smiles and quiet coffee mornings, danger was still circling, the kind that didn't knock on doors, the kind that rode in silence and shot first. And before the stage to California ever left that station, someone in Silver Creek was going to die. Night fell over Silver Creek like a heavy blanket. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried that electric tension before something breaks. Inside the small boarding house, Jeremiah Clay couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching lanterns flicker along the muddy street. Every sound felt like a warning. Across the hall, Clara's room was quiet. She'd fallen asleep after hours of pretending everything was fine. He could still see her earlier, dressed as a widow, her hands shaking slightly as she poured coffee, trying to play a role that life had forced on her. Elias returned near midnight, boots wet, face drawn. "They're here," he said simply. "Foster's men." "2 of them." "Asking around the saloon." Jeremiah nodded. The calm in his eyes wasn't peace. It was the stillness of a man who has run out of places to run. He checked his revolver, the motion slow, deliberate. "What's the plan?" Elias asked. We protect her," Jeremiah said. "No matter what." The next few hours moved like a dream you don't want to remember. Footsteps outside, a knock that never came, then silence again, when dawn finally broke. But as the coach rolled away, Jeremiah spotted a rider on the hill, watching. The fight wasn't over, but for Clara, freedom had begun. Foster's men had moved on, fooled by their disguise, at least for the moment. Clara stood on the porch, watching the first stagecoach of the morning roll out toward California. She looked back at Jeremiah, tears mixing with the early sunlight. "Thank you," she said. Jeremiah shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just live. That's payment enough." Elias smiled quietly from behind them. "Guess some debts do get settled after all." As the coach disappeared into the rising dust, Jeremiah felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, the weight of guilt began to lift. He realized that redemption doesn't come from hiding from the past. It comes from facing it and choosing to be better than the man you used to be. And maybe that's the real story of this desert. That no matter how far you've fallen, there's always a road leading back to the person you were meant to be. Sometimes that road is long, sometimes it hurts, but it's still worth walking. So tell me, what would you do if life gave you a second chance? Would you take it or let it pass like dust in the wind? If this story stirred something in you, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Each story here carries a bit of the Wild West and maybe a bit of us too. Now, pour yourself a cup of tea, take a breath, and tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from?